So recently, the Batman Arkham trilogy came to the Nintendo Switch, and I picked it up. And the first game that I was interested in trying was Batman Arkham Knight, mainly because Batman Arkham Knight is a PS4 game and a quite graphically intensive PS4 game. Like, if you look at it now, it still holds up surprisingly well. If you compare it to other games from 2015, then you can tell they've kind of got a little bit of jank to them. They don't look as high quality as games do nowadays, but looking at Arkham Knight, it still looks like if it released today, it would still look incredible. So when I found out that it was coming to the Switch, I thought I'm going to try it and just to see how well it actually runs. And I have played up until the Ace Chemicals section, which is about, I want to say, 2 hours into the game. So I feel like I've got a good idea of the basic mechanics of the game and how well it runs on the Switch. Okay, let's start off with the big question, and that is, how is the game to play? And honestly, it is not as bad as you would think. Yes, there are some instances where the game will drop frames and it will slow down a considerable amount, that being when you're driving the Batmobile. But when you're in free flow combat, it's surprisingly smooth. I thought using the Fear takedown would tank the frame rate, but it doesn't. The only bit I did notice is when you're gliding through the city, sometimes Batman will stutter in the air and kind of hang there for a second before carry on gliding forward. But I'd say if you have no other way of playing Arkham Knight and this is the only way you can, I would say it is a serviceable way of doing it, even though it's not the most ideal. Taking a little look further into the game, we can talk about the Batmobile a bit. When the game was announced to come to Switch, the Batmobile was the main reason I was concerned about this port. And I have to say that is probably the biggest issue with the port, and that is when you are driving the Batmobile, the frame rate does suffer quite a bit. Like, you can see it drop frames constantly, and there's quite a lot of slowdown. But oddly enough, when you are in tank mode, the frame rate kind of smooths out a bit. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that. But not to say that the driving is unplayable. Like, you can still control it. But surprisingly enough, it feels more sluggish to control in the Switch port than it does in, say, the PC or the console ports. The next thing I want to talk about is some of the character models in the game, and for the most part they are surprisingly well detailed. Obviously Batman is the most well detailed, for example, as he is the character you're looking at the most. But what I did notice is, say with Commissioner Gordon, for example, when he is outside Ace Chemicals wearing his kind of blue police jacket with GCPD on the back, that the texture qualities are considerably lower, and also it takes a while for some textures to pop in, which honestly is to be expected. Like, with this game running on Switch, did you really expect it to be like a one-for-one version of Arkham Knight? No. So I was expecting to see some graphical decreases, I guess. Like, I didn't expect it to be like PS4 level on the Switch. Also, I want to say that the Poison Ivy character model from the start of the game, she looks surprisingly well detailed in the face. I think what they've done, similar to the Hogwarts Legacy Switch port, is they've focused more on the faces than the actual bodies of the character models. As if you look at some of the clothes of some of the other characters, that is where the kind of corners have been cut so they can get the game running on Switch. It's not to say that the character models look awful, it's just sometimes the textures will take a while to pop in onto the characters, and you can actually see that happen in real time, which is a little bit jarring sometimes. The opening cutscene, for example, that is pre-rendered, so that is pretty smooth. The only bit that is a bit wonky is when it zooms in on Joker's face, and the texture quality on his face is quite blurry, but you can still see that it's him. And if you've played Arkham Knight, I'm going to spoil a little bit, but the bit where Joker shows up in Ace Chemicals and you wake up from the like flashback to Commissioner Gordon, his kind of blotchy face is still there, but it's considerably blurrier and fuzzier, but you can still make out what is actually on his face. The last bit I want to talk about the Switch port is actually the install size for the game, and that is that it is 27 gigabytes on the Switch, which for a Switch game is quite a lot. Like, I can't think of any other Switch games that are that big. Like, for example, I know Hogwarts Legacy is, I want to say, 14 gigabytes is the install size. I'm pretty sure half of it is on the Switch card and half of it you need to download. But with the Batman Arkham Trilogy on Switch, you only get Arkham Asylum on the Switch card, and you need to install City and Night, which I was a bit miffed about, but I guess they didn't want to pay for a bigger Switch storage card, so that's fine. But yeah, just to kind of summarise my thoughts on the Switch port, yes, it is playable. I would not probably recommend it for your first time playing through the game, unless the Switch is the only console you have, then I would say go for it. Also, I've seen online the Switch port of Arkham Knight getting a lot of hate, which honestly I don't agree with personally, because going into it you knew the game would have to make certain sacrifices to run on a system that is 1, severely underpowered to run the game, 2, going on like 6 years old, and yeah, like you kind of knew going into it would have to make quite a lot of sacrifices to run a game such as Arkham Knight, which has really great, like, the story is phenomenal. Obviously the story won't be really compromised because obviously it's the story, but like the graphical fidelity would have to be toned down a hell of a lot to run on the Switch. So I just want to say, if you went into this game thinking it's going to be a one-for-one kind of port from the PS4 to the Switch, you're not going to be getting that here. But if you kind of have a more open mind and kind of think, okay, the game will run at a lower frame rate and it won't be as smooth and look as great, then I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with Arkham Knight on the Switch. But also just bear in mind that when using the Batmobile, it will tank the frame rate. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on the Switch port Batman Arkham Knight. I do plan on doing videos like this similar to Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, but I assume those two games will be much more similar to their original releases, so I'm sure there won't be that much difference there. I have heard that the Switch port of Arkham City is considerably smoother than the Wii U port was, so I'm looking forward to try that. But yeah, that is all I have for this video. I'd love to hear what you think about the Switch port in the comment section down below, and I will see you next time.